I'm Jim Antle. I'm the conference minister here at the Massachusetts Conference, and it's my pleasure to welcome you, whether you are present in this room or joining us online for this live-streamed presentation. I want to begin by just saying that the assets of our churches matter a lot, and I am grateful for the wisdom in this room, the care and concern in this room for the assets of the church. I'm certain that you're going to find today's presentation to be informative. You'll have ample opportunity to answer any questions that you have, and mostly my role here is to just thank you for your responsible oversight of these assets, not just for this current generation, but for future generations as well. It's my pleasure now to turn this microphone over to Art, who is the chairperson, is that right? President of the Mass Congregational Fund, and he'll have some opening comments as well. Art?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our meeting, and thank you for coming. My name is Arthur Brownlow. I am the president of the board of the Massachusetts Congregational Fund. Our fund has been serving the investment needs of congregational churches and other congregational organizations for over 70 years. However, we have provided a service which we believe is no longer really necessary due to all the different resources that are now available for investors in general. So after a long discussion of period, we decided that the best thing to do is to close the Massachusetts Congregational Fund. So this closure will occur very soon. We're in the process now, and it's one of the benefits, among other things, is that the cost, which is very small, that for using the Congregational Fund will no longer be a cost for our churches, because now they are going to be able to directly invest in United Church funds. We have used the United Church funds for the last 10 years as our investment organization. The purpose of this meeting is to provide information and answer questions on how individual churches can make the transition from the Massachusetts Congregational Fund to direct investment in United Church funds. So we're hopeful that this meeting this morning will answer questions you may have and provide information that will make for a smooth transition, assuming that the churches wish to do so, a smooth transition to United Church funds. So I would like to turn the meeting over to Don Hart, who is the president of United Church Funds.
Thank you, Art. It is a real pleasure for us as staff of United Church Funds to be here today and explain what we do, to answer questions about the transition, and talk to you about your various options that you have once the Massachusetts Congregational Fund closes. I have with me here today Howard Hawkins, who's our Director of Business Development, standing in the back, and he will be presenting after I do. And we have with us Stacy Pettis, who is one of our business development associates, and she is going to be taking questions online. So if anyone is watching this presentation online and have a question, feel free to send your question, and she will make sure that it gets stated, and then we'll be happy to answer that. As Art said, for over 10 years, we've been working with the Massachusetts Congregational Fund in managing the investments of the two trusts, the fixed income and the equity trust that you all are invested in. We recently, the MCF also recently opened a Beyond Fossil Fuels Fund, which is our fossil fuel-free option, and that has not been available to churches. At the time that the transition occurs, all of your churches will have the opportunity to either transfer directly into accounts with United Church Funds or to seek investment with some other provider. We certainly hope that you will want to consider us as your investment manager, and we're happy to work with you in explaining your options. Howard's going to talk about the different funds we have, but we have many more options available to you than you've had investing directly through the Congregational Fund. So I'm going to ask Howard now to come forward and go through this presentation, and then we're going to have a series of questions and answers. And We hope that you have a lot of questions, and we hope that we have the appropriate answers for you. Howard?
Thank you, Don. We have a short presentation here for you, which I think will provide you with an overview of United Church Funds, both its investment options as well as its administration and client services. Stacy, if you'll hit the next slide. Now, this may be somewhat redundant for some of you who are familiar with us, but in order to make sure everyone has a clear understanding of who we are and what we do, we'd just like to highlight a few points for you. As you can see at the top, we're a trusted investment partner for over 1,000 churches throughout the United States. We've been in business for over 100 years, but I would say over the past 40 to 50 years, United Church Funds has evolved into an organization that provides its investment management service to churches. It's not just for their endowments, but for planned giving and other services as well. Given the market's close on Friday, we probably have close to $800 million in assets under management, and those assets are spread amongst 13 investment options, which range from a money market, a fixed income, and a range of equity options that really span the risk-return spectrum, including international equity, small cap, large cap domestic, as Don mentioned previously, our Beyond Fossil Fuels Fund, and balanced funds as well. And when we talk about experienced leadership, Don Hart has been the president of UCF for 25 years. In today's time, that's more than most people spend at a firm given in a senior position at any given organization. Oh, that was a smooth transition, Stacy. Thank you. As I mentioned, we've been around for over 100 years. I think I'd like to have you look at the second point there, because while there are numerous, actually there's a multitude of investment firms that can provide investment management services, none are as uniquely qualified or were established to provide investment management services specifically and solely to religious organizations, in this case, to members of the United Church of Christ. At the bottom, you'll also see that we are a firm that provides socially responsible investment options and environmental, social, and governance as well, and I'll speak to that just a little bit later. This slide is really unique because what you need to understand about United Church Funds is that we do not manage the assets internally. We hire outside investment managers to manage the funds based upon our guidelines and restrictions. So you'll see in the upper left-hand corner the UCF Investment Committee, which is comprised of investment professionals and people who are familiar with the investment markets, both domestically and internationally. They help us to formulate and implement the investment policy and the overall strategy for the funds. If you move over to your right, you'll see the Chief Investment Strategist, who is Dave Klassen. He has an over 30-year career on Wall Street, and he serves as the individual who really selects, identifies, and puts the managers in place to manage the funds upon our behalf. Then you'll see in the lower right-hand corner the investment managers, of which there are several who manage the various funds, and then the investment consultant in the lower left-hand corner, which is Summit Strategies, which is based in St. Louis, and they provide us with the research and help us to monitor the managers, looking at both their performance from a peer perspective, and if they're continually providing our clients, i.e. you, with the performance that you come to expect from us. So it's a circular situation where there's a little overlap, and we're continually trying to ensure that we're providing you with competitive funds at a competitive cost as well. The next few slides just talk again about the 13 funds that we manage, 6 actively managed funds, and then 6 fund of funds. The fund of funds, which you'll see later, are comprised of the 6 actively managed funds. Next. What you see on this slide is the investment performance as of March 31st of 2016. This performance is also available on our website as well, UCF Funds, or ucfunds.org. This is a key slide. If you look to the right-hand side, you'll see the 13 funds, as I mentioned, ranging from cash and equivalents, which is a money market fund, all the way down to alternatives balanced. And you'll see the expense ratios for each one of those funds as well. United Church Funds is structured in a way to minimize the cost to our church members. So we are a not-for-profit institution. Any savings that we have, we pass along to our clients. And you'll see that there are no 12B1 fees, there are no transaction fees, there are no front-end fees, there are no backload fees. The only fee you'll see is the all-encompassing expense ratio, which covers not only the investment management services, but the administration and client services as well. Any questions? It's not good if I'm the only one talking up here. All right, let's move along. We talked earlier about the administration, the investment management, but here's a crucial component that I think you might want to consider also, and that's the multifaceted approach that we take to social responsibility. If you speak with most managers out there, they're focusing on one item or only one component of this multifaceted approach, and that's the screens. Now, in this case, we exclude tobacco, alcohol, gambling, military weapons, coal and tar sands, and human rights and occupied Palestinian territories. Those are the companies that we screen out, all right? But that's only one component. What comes next are the corporate engagements and the resolutions, working with other organizations, be it UNPR, RI, and others, to really bring about change through our ownership in the companies that we have through the equity funds that we manage on your behalf. Collaboration with key partners, investor initiatives, the proxy voting, the shareholder resolutions. It's a really comprehensive approach to bringing about change in the marketplace through our ownership in companies and through our partnership with both religious and non-religious organizations. And at the end of the day, if we can bring about changes through our ownership that is better for society, that makes these companies better, it drops to the bottom line, we reap the benefits and you reap the benefits through the appreciation in your ownership in these companies, it's a win-win situation for everybody. All right? And again, these are some of the organizations that we work with. I'm going to raise this up just a little bit more. Great. Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. You'll see the top bullet point really speaks to who we are as an organization. United Church of Christ is a recognized founding member of ICCR, and of course, United Church Funds is a ministry of the United Church of Christ. And I won't repeat what you can already read, but you get a pretty good idea. And then we talk about some of the things that we're working on, addressing oil companies, their unburned reserves, seeking fair vote counting policies for corporate annual meetings, and so forth. All right. And then this just speaks to some of the works that Katie McCloskey, who's our Director for Social Responsibility, is undertaking on our behalf. All right. Client service. Who are these two beautiful women on the screen here? Millie Hernandez, standing with the phone, and Krista Sealaw. They are the individuals that you will most likely speak to in addition to Gaylord Tang when you call our office. So you're not going to get a voice recording. You're not going to hear a menu of options. You're not going to get put on hold with elevator music. You're going to speak to an experienced individual at the firm. Don, Millie has been with the firm for how long? And Krista has been 4 years. So they're experienced. They know most of our clients by name on a first-name basis. I'm sure they know some of you as well. And if they don't have an answer for you immediately, they'll research it, speak with the appropriate parties, and get back to you as soon as possible via email or more likely by a call. All right. Supporting church endowments. This is our mainstay. This is who we are, and this is what we do. Our mission is to help each church that is a client achieve their missions. So through your endowments, through the monies that those endowments generate on an annual basis, they're supporting your mission. Our goal, our sole mission is to make sure that we provide you with the best investment performance possible at the most effective price point to allow you to do what you do best, which you've identified in your individual communities. And planned giving as well. This is something that we've been doing on an individual basis for a number of years. But later this year, hopefully this summer, that we'll be introducing a program that's specifically designed to provide churches with the planned giving services they need to engage their members in order to raise money, something that goes beyond the annual giving, something that will help sustain the church long after they're gone. Now, I don't want to make that sound morbid, but the whole idea is that these endowments are everlasting and that they'll continue to do the work of the church in years to come. And that's crucial. As a matter of fact, I'm sure most of you in this room or those in the audience are aware that a number of churches today are doing great work based upon the endowments that were established by people of visionary thoughts 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, which is amazing. The idea that someone could plant a seed today, set up an endowment, fund it, and then 50 years hence, great work is still being done as a result of that. Those obviously aren't my hands. My hands are too big. So a lot of kids there, and that's it. So the idea of this meeting, and first again, I want to just reiterate what Jim said earlier. Thank you all for taking the time to come out on a Saturday morning. But the purpose behind this meeting is really to answer and address any issues, any thoughts, any questions that you may have regarding this transition and what you could look to receive from United Church Funds going forward. I want to leave you with two thoughts before I open it up. And I've said this before, and Don may tire of me saying this, but I think the key word for everyone here is solutions, because now you've got an option to either remain with United Church Funds or look outside of United Church Funds, and I would encourage you to do that. But I think if you're looking for an organization that was set up and structured to provide services that meet the specific needs of religious organizations, in this case the UCC, if you're looking for cost-effective price points on your funds, if you're looking for stellar client service, and if you're looking for a partner, and I underline the word partner, that's going to help you meet your solutions, not only today, but tomorrow as well, United Church Funds is the place to be. Again, 13 investment options. We're opening up our full array of services to you. I can't think of a better choice, but of course I'm biased. So the decision is yours alone. Please ask questions, and we'll open it to both the individuals who have taken their time to be here today and to those on the webcast audience as well.
The services that you provided, is that the services provided within the fee structure that is in place, or?
No. Yes. The question was, thank you, Don. The question was, are the administration and client services that we offer, is that represented by an additional or separate fee, or is that encompassed in our overall expense ratio? The answer is the latter. Administration, investment management, client services are all encompassed. Stacy, if you just go back a couple of slides. Great. Up. One more down. There you go. They're all encompassed in that expense ratio. So let's look at that for a second, just to make sure everybody understands that. Let's look at the small cap equity fund, which is the fifth fund down, okay? That shows an expense ratio of 1.41%, all right? So if you were to look at a $100 investment, all right, on an annual basis, that's what it costs to manage that fund, $1.41. But that $1.41 covers the cost for our investment managers. It covers our administrative costs inside of United Church Funds for the client service, back office, legal fees. Everything is included in that 141. If you go down to the conservative balance fund, 0.82, or sometimes people refer to that as 82 basis points. That means on an annual basis, for a $100 invested in the conservative balance fund, it's 82 cents. That's what your annual cost is. Everything is included in that 82 cents. And after I talk to Don and twist his arm a little bit, maybe we can reduce those fees. Yes, Dan.
Why is there such a range in fees among those funds? You see, for example, fixed income at 58 basis points to, for example, alternatives at 1.56.
Yes. Yes, the fee structure for all the various funds, and you'll see this isn't unique to United Church Funds. It's replicated amongst the mutual fund industry. There's a series of services, there's a series of expertise that's involved with managing all of these funds. So the fixed income fund, you're specifically talking about bonds, you're talking about both domestic bonds, maybe a small smattering of foreign bonds, and perhaps some corporate bonds. The research required to cover that market is less than, say, the domestic equity or core equity, because now you're talking about thousands of companies, research analysts and so forth in-house to do that. International equity is even more so because now you're dealing with companies abroad, different accounting structures, different governance structures, so the cost and the travel, everything associated with that is much more cost intensive. So that's why you see the range of cost across the various funds. That also reflects what the managers for each of those respective funds are charging us as well.
If I have it correct, our MCF costs included this cost in their costs, so our overall cost should go down a little bit.
Yes. The question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the overall cost for churches transitioning to United Church funds should go down because the overlay that MCF charged will no longer exist. Is that correct? Okay. Please. Oh, did you want to? Oh. Jim or Arthur, I can address it, but because of that expense will be negated, the overall cost will go down. So your overall cost will be what you see on the screen here for each of these representative funds. Did I answer your question? Okay, I just want to make sure. Jim or Art, can you tell us what the overall administrative fee was for then? 30 basis points. Okay, 3 sounded better. 30 basis points. Okay, so for an example, if we're looking at the total equity fund, which is 1.03, that would have been 133. So your cost for being invested in that fund would go from 133 or 1.33 to 1.03%, which is a nice cost savings. It drops right to the bottom line. But again, that additional layer of cost was replicated the cost and administrative fees for MCF to serve as the intermediary, helping churches meet their goals. So, but now that you'll be dealing directly with the United Church funds, that cost is removed. I'm going to get some water.
While Howard is getting water, there's one thing that we have not mentioned that I think is important for you to know. In the Massachusetts Congregational Fund, you were able to transact once a month because the funds were valued on a monthly basis. We value all of our funds except the 2 alternative options, but all of the other funds are valued on a daily basis. So that means on any day that the church wants to either deposit money or withdraw money from the investment account, you are able to do that. You do not have to wait till the end of the month.
Any additional questions? Any thoughts, concerns, ideas, suggestions? Yes, Dick. Sure. The question was compare a church investing with the United Church funds versus managing their portfolio, if you will, in-house through investing in ETFs or other investment vehicles. I could tell you that ETFs on the surface would be cheaper. Depending on how much that account is traded, that might not hold. But I can also tell you that if you're taking this risk on yourself, internally, you want to have the client service. You want to have the constant monitoring of the fund managers to ensure that they're adhering to the guidelines that we've laid out for them. You'll have no way of knowing whether the ETFs or those companies are adhering to the stated goals and values and objective of the United Church of Christ. And you'll certainly have no one advocating upon your behalf or the church's behalf in terms of working with both religious and non-religious organizations to bring about change in the marketplace through socially responsible investing, SRI, or environmental, social, and governance, ESG. So there's a range of services which I'm only scratching the surface on that would not be available to you as an individual investor. There's no way you'd have those resources or the time or expertise necessary to monitor all those facets along the investment spectrum. Whereas at United Church Funds, again, it goes back to the comments I mentioned earlier, we were founded to provide these services specifically to churches at a competitive price point and also to provide the best investment management services available out there, which goes back to the investment policy screen that you saw earlier, that circular slide in terms of the overlap, in terms of the investment committee, in terms of the chief investment strategist, in terms of the managers, our consultant, everyone making sure that we're providing the best service humanly possible. So there is a cost to doing it on your own. And I think that if you were to lay those examples side by side, we'd come out far ahead in a cost comparison. Yes, Dan.
How do you analyze companies or your social screens? For example, it might be easier for a company to do exclusively tobacco or alcohol, but say much harder with a multinational like General Electric.
Well, Don, the question is, how do we analyze to make sure that companies that we're screening out are the proper companies based upon our guidelines? Is that correct? So, for example, if you look at a company like Philip Morris, that's pretty easy. They're in the tobacco business, okay, have been for years. So that's easy to screen out. But you might look at another company like Lowe's. Now, Lowe's is a conglomerate that has interest in a multitude of companies and industries. And at one point, if not today, tobacco was a small part of that. So we can look at these companies also not only on an absolute basis, but on a revenue basis as well. What percentage or portion of their overall revenues are derived from a specific entity? So, for example, if the gambling rate was, give me an example, 10% of 10 or 20%. So if a company has an interest in gambling, but it only represents 3% of their overall revenues, we may not exclude that company because our gap might be, 10% or more. And the idea here is we're not trying to exclude every company under the sun, because at the end of the day, we are providing investment management services, but we do want to ensure that we exclude those companies that do not comply with the guidelines of the UCC or that we've outlined in United Church Funds as well. So we look at the overall, we look at the absolute and the overall percentage of revenues in terms of the guidelines that we've established. And these guidelines are laid out in our investment policy. They're also appear on our website as well for anyone to see. Yes, Arthur.
How should church think about risk when they're trying to decide which one of these funds or which group of funds they would invest in? How should they approach that?
Yes, the question is, how should a church think about or evaluate risk when they're looking to make investments in our funds or with a competitor? And I would say that the key here, and this goes back to the other question of ETFs versus investing with United Church Funds. We have Matt Wagner and Stacy Pettis. Stacy Pettis is with us here today. Stacy has a career on Wall Street, having worked several years at Goldman Sachs and about almost a year and a half to two at Fidelity. She recently joined us in January of this year. She has a wealth of experience to share with our clients. Matt Wagner has been with United Church Funds for about 4 years now, three to 4 years. He grew up in the United Church of Christ. His father is a minister of the United Church of Christ, and he has an investment background as well. These are the individuals that are available to you either in person, through conference call, or on the phone to help you walk through these investment options, to help you identify and formulate an investment policy that really meets the objectives of the church. And again, this is all long-term investing. We're looking 3, 5, 10, 15 years out. So these individuals will help you walk through your investment policy statement, help you identify what you, the individual church, and that committee is comfortable with in terms of investment, what your goals, what your objectives are, and then help you put that policy in place, and then help you identify and select the funds that are appropriate for you. And again, when we talk about that, these 13 funds really represent the spectrum of investments: fixed income, domestic, small cap, international, total equity, which encompasses small, large, international, balanced funds, conservative, moderate, aggressive, beyond fossil fuels, and alternatives, which engage in commodities, long and short investing, real estate, and so forth. Those 13 funds, again, I can't impress upon you enough, really span the spectrum of the essential asset classes along that risk-return spectrum. So for any church that's looking to formulate a policy that reflects their long-term goals, these funds will help you get there. Again, I draw not subject to 12B1s or sales commissions. There are no hidden fees here. It's all black and white. What you see on that far right-hand side of the screen, that's the expense. Doesn't change. And if it did change, we'd provide ample notification. But I don't think we've had any changes for the past couple of years. Is that correct, Don? Yep. There you go. Yes, Dan.
In the ESG area, does UCF reach out to other organizations for voting purposes to influence companies so that you are in conversation with others who share our values to increase the number of votes that will participate?
Absolutely. I can speak to that on a first-hand basis. Prior to coming on board last May, United Church Funds, I headed up sales and marketing at Christian Brothers Investment Services. And Christian Brothers focuses exclusively on Catholic institutions. It's a company located in New York City. But the great thing is that even though that's a Catholic institution, even though this is United Church of Christ, we're both religious entities, we both have commonalities, and we work together and pool our proxy votes together to affect change. So some may look at United Church Funds and say, well, you have about $775 million in assets. You know, what does that, how do you impact a vote for a specific company on a governance, environmental, or social issue? But the beauty of collaboration is that we're able to work with the Christian Brothers. We're able to work with the Pax Worlds. We're able to work with the West Paths. We're able to work with the non-religious organizations, find commonality of purpose, work together, pool our votes, and not only do the proxy voting, but to put shareholder resolutions forward and to make other shareholders, be they pension funds, be they individuals, whatever, to also make them aware of the issues that they may not realize or be made aware of otherwise. By doing that and working with all these other entities, we're able to really pool those votes together to bring about change. Now, the time frame for that change could be 3, 4, 5, it could be several years, because the first step is getting this share resolution out there to be voted on in the first place. But then over time, constantly pushing that issue for success, we're able to bring about change. So the key word there is collaboration. Yes?
What would be included in the alternative funds, like, for example, you've got HFI, funds of funds?
Yep. Hedge funds, funds that can go long, short, funds that can go 140-30, 130-40, funds that are able, managers that are able to go beyond the traditional investments, if you will, so commodities, real estate, going long, short, things of that nature. And that really, the beauty of that is that that provides you something that's not directly correlated to the equity or fixed income markets. So funds like the Alternatives Fund allow you to sort of smooth out that performance as part of your portfolio because there's not a direct correlation between the equity markets. I'm sorry.
Going forward, with the quarterly investment news report that we get, only show like the first trust and the second trust. Let's say we make no changes. Will we actually see a breakdown then of the different funds that this is now in? How much the report will reflect if we make no changes?
Right. The question was, what will clients see? Right now, they just see the first trust and the second trust, representing the total equity and fixed income funds. What will you see going forward as part of that reporting? But there are a couple of things. One, if you don't make any changes, you'll continue to see those funds, but you'll also see going forward that you'll be able to access on the website is a fund fact sheet. And the fund fact sheet is a 2-page analysis that provides an overview for not only the funds you're invested in today, but for all 11 funds on a quarterly basis that provides assets, statistical information, investment performance, metrics, and so forth. So you'll see that for the 11 funds going forward, and that will be what you'll receive in your report as well. Yes, and why don't you?
When you receive your quarterly statement from us, it will, if you are currently in the first trust, that's the fixed income or the equity? The equity. So if you transition to us, that first trust will be invested in the total equity fund. The second trust will be invested in the fixed income fund unless you make some change in how you have your allocation. Now, having fixed income and total equity is a balanced fund. So we have 3 balanced fund options, which most of our current investors are invested in a balanced fund rather than separately in the different asset classes. So if you choose to remain the way you're invested now, you'll see 2 assets on your statement. One will be called fixed income. The other will be called total equity. If you were to move into a balanced fund, you'll have 1 asset, and that would be called like the moderate balanced fund. So whatever you choose to invest in, you will see those individual funds listed.
So where this now shows like the domestic core equity, that'll all go into total equity?
Right. You won't see domestic core equity because if you're in total equity, that is the name of the fund that you're in. We will disclose on our performance sheet how much of total equity is domestic core, how much is small cap, and how much is international. That's correct. The total equity owns those underlying 3 equity funds. Yeah. Art. Dan. Okay. The Beyond Fossil Fuels Fund is something I'm going to say is completely apart from. Okay, but let me explain the Beyond Fossil Fuels Fund. It is a total equity fund effective this month. It is a total equity fund that is free of companies that extract and produce fossil fuels. So that's an equity fund. We have a Beyond Fossil Fuels Balanced Fund, and it will be fixed income and equity, all of it free of fossil fuel companies. Now, excluding the Beyond Fossil Fuels funds, you have the 3 underlying equity funds, small cap, international, and domestic core, that comprise the total equity fund. The 3 balanced funds, the conservative, moderate, and aggressive, own shares in our fixed income fund and shares in our total equity fund in various proportions, so that the conservative has a 65% allocation to fixed income and only 35% to equity as a target with some parameters around that. The moderate balanced fund has a 60% equity and 40% fixed income allocation, and the aggressive balanced fund has a 75% equity with a 25% fixed income allocation. So they're just different allocations to fixed income and total equity. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
When you're talking about legacy, Warren Buffett once said, someone sitting in the shade today is someone planted a tree a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, I know this is all foreign language to me, but my inclination has always been to go with the conference and with the denomination. However, some of us might be surprised to know that congregational members don't always agree with their pastor.
The comment that was just made is that congregational members do not always agree with their pastor, and I think no one disagrees with that statement.
And so, if we were to ask Stacy or Matt
That's his
to
name.
come and talk to us and explain all of this, and in the end, I understand that if we were to be in the United Church Fund, that's covered under the fees. But what if the congregation decided not to go with the United Church Funds? Is there a fee for that, or is that covered in some other fear out there.
Okay, so I'm going to try to understand. The question is, if the church were to not go with United Church funds, would there be a fee for that? I'm going to try to answer it in two ways. One is if you choose to invest with another provider, there will be no fee from us. If your church, though, wants us to work with you with planned giving, we will provide that service at no cost. But we hope that you want to invest with us.
Just because I suggested it might not happen.
But I do want you to know that the services we provide around helping churches establish good endowment policies, planned giving program, those are services we will provide because you're a church of the United Church of Christ. Other questions? Yes, sir.
We're being asked to indicate percentages of allocations to various funds or investments listed here. And I understand that online we can get some statistics that might help us with those decisions. I'm looking for more sense of how we'll get guidance or how we'll get information that our people can use to make those decisions.
Okay. Stacy is here today, and I want you to meet her and talk to her. And to the extent that there are too many churches asking the questions, Matt will also be involved. And to the extent necessary, Howard and I will also be available to talk with churches about what your options are and how to go about making those decisions. When we look at endowments, if you look at the not-for-profit world and universities and other not-for-profits that have endowments, there are certain traditional asset allocations that many of them use, and then now the larger endowments are adding alternatives to their investment program. But historically, a moderate balance fund is what many not-for-profits, that kind of allocation is what they've used. And that's why historically, most of the investors that we have that invest directly with us have utilized the moderate balance fund. But we're going to work with you, your church, individually to determine what is the most appropriate in your situation. Look at how you're currently invested. And if you're currently invested in a way that is similar to the moderate balance fund, we would say that would be an option for you. If you're more conservatively invested and have more fixed income now than you do equity, we could say the conservative balance fund might be something that you would want to consider. So we're going to work with each church individually to make that determination to the extent they need our assistance. Dan?
You mentioned investment policy. What is it?
Say that again. Ask the question again.
Investment policies. What are they? And is it worthwhile trying to set them up?
Well, the question is, what are our investment policies, and is it worth the time to set it up? Okay, for each church. Many churches already have an investment policy, and so we would be happy to review that to make sure it's consistent with what you're going to be investing in with United Church funds. If a church doesn't have a policy, you're probably not going to establish one between now and July the 1st. So we will help you know where to move now, but then encourage you for the long-term health of the church to think about establishing an investment policy so that when future decisions around investment allocations need to be made, you already have a policy base to help you with that. So we're not saying that you have to have an investment policy statement, but we're saying that if you have one, we will be happy to review it. And if you don't have one, we'll be happy to help you develop one if that's what you desire. Yes, sir.
Timeframe, you just mentioned July 1st. What's our deadline for making sure our application gets to you in order for everything to transition on July 1st?
I believe we set a June 1st deadline. I haven't read through all the Q&A recently, but we need some time to get all the structure set up in our system so that on July the 1st, the transition is seamless. If you didn't decide till June the 15th, I'm sure that we're still going to be able to make that happen. For you to know, though, I think in the documentation you received, it is assumed that if we don't receive notification, it will automatically transition. in exactly the way you're invested now. If that happens and you decide that, well, we really wanted to make a change, we'll make the change whenever you want it to be. And as I said, it's not only monthly, it could be any day of the month. Whenever we receive notice to make an asset reallocation, we can do it at that point. Yes, sir.
Do churches typically spread their assets over several of these different alternatives, or do they typically pick one or two and pretty much send them there?
Do churches typically spread their investments over various funds, or do they choose one or two? By far, the large majority of the current investors we have invest in one fund, and that's one of the balanced fund options. The reason being is we're monitoring the asset allocation within those funds. And if we have a target, we're going to manage the asset allocation around that target, overweighting equities when we think equities are going to have a better return and underweighting them when we think they're going to have worse returns. So we're monitoring that and making changes tactically from time to time. If a local church is invested separately in these funds, someone has to be watching the asset allocation and making decisions about when to reallocate. So we kind of take that decision off the church if you're comfortable with the parameters of one of the balanced funds. No questions online? Okay. Yes, sir.
I just have a question, only because I haven't been on the endowment committee before they started investing with the fund. So our reports show the breakdown into the first trust. Historically, will we have had the option to go into the balance fund? Was this determined by an endowment committee years ago?
So the question is, currently the way the endowment is invested is shown on the statement. Has the church had the option of being in the balance fund? The answer is that you haven't been invested in United Church funds. You've been invested in the Massachusetts Congregational Fund in its two trusts. They have not provided a balance fund option. Now, we have been managing those assets for the last 10 years, but we've only been managing what would be the equivalent of our total equity fund and our fixed income fund. If and when you transition to United Church funds, you now have balanced fund options that you did not previously have. Van?
You said you select investment managers. What are your criteria for selecting them, and do you ever terminate them?
Do we have criteria for selecting investment managers, and do we ever terminate them? Yes and yes. We use a consultant to help us identify managers when we are seeking managers for a particular asset class. We're looking for managers that have good long-term performance, stable, a team that's stable, an investment firm that is willing to use our investment screens and help us. And we're being more aggressive now in finding managers that actually look at environmental, governance, and social issues as part of their investment process. We also, when we're looking for an investment management firm, at least in the identification of a pool of managers, we always insist that our consultant identify at least one, if not several, minority or female-owned firms, because we want to at least have the diversification in the pool of managers. So that's what we do. We have, in the last 10 years, I know of 2, if not 3 managers we have terminated, and primarily because they've either had style drift, where if we hired a small cap value manager, their capitalization is more of a mid-cap fund instead of a small cap, and the performance is not good, so we make that decision. Or we determine that there is underperformance that's been consistent, and we just don't think it's going to turn around, and it's time to find a new manager, and we exit from the other manager. Someone else said, yes, ma'am.
Do you have a list of all, say you go in a small cap equity, of all the
Yes, we do, with a clarification about that answer. What's held in those funds changes on a daily basis, okay? Because the managers buy stocks and they may hold them for years, or they may, buy another company and sell a company. What we do is on an annual basis post on our website what at least at year end was held in all of the funds. That way it's representative of the kinds of stocks that are in the fund, but like I said, it's a lot of work to produce that because we're talking about thousands of stocks. But we do that annually, and we can provide it on a monthly basis. It's just not as pretty a report as we do on an annual basis. But we can provide the information at any time. These are some really good questions. Yes, sir.
I think I heard you say on the balanced funds, there's more day-to-day attention to those funds to make sure that they're performing properly without us doing anything. Yet the defaults are to go to the total equity fund and the fixed income fund. And I'm trying in my head to figure out why a balanced fund wasn't more the default. It seems like it's better.
So the question is, if we're managing asset allocation and looking at that continually in our balanced funds, why would the default transition be to the fixed income fund and the total equity fund and not to one of the balanced funds? The reason of that is that we cannot make an asset allocation decision on behalf of the church. The church has to make that decision. And each of the churches represented here or in the Massachusetts Congregational Fund probably has a very different allocation between fixed income and total equity than the next church does. So we would have to be looking at every one of those and saying, well, they're almost the conservative, they're almost the moderate, and we would then have to be making a decision on behalf of the church. We just can't do that. So we can't assume anything, so we have to work with the church in saying, like if you talk to Stacy, she might say, right now you have 62% of your total in equities, and the rest of it is in fixed income. That's very close to our moderate balance fund. If you want us to manage asset allocation on your behalf, that might be the more appropriate decision for you to make. So that's the kind of work that we will do with you. What we do want you to know is that we are available. And so any questions that you have now, after we finish this meeting today, we're available while we're here having lunch. We're available during the week if you want to give us a call and say, I've been thinking about it, but I failed to ask this question. We're happy to answer those questions. We are available to you. You just need to give us a call. And then Stacy's going to be reaching out to you also to help you. I have not personally looked at the presentation. Okay. So we failed to have a page in there with contact information. So the best way to contact us is to send us an email at info@ucfunds.org. Actually, we have a different email address, don't we, for this? Is it MCF at? Yeah, it is, but you probably do, and I'm sorry. We set up a separate email address specifically for the Massachusetts churches so that we can isolate those from our current investors, and they would get routed directly to Stacy and some of the other of us.
Oh, it's mcftransfer@ucfunds.
So if you would like to contact us, mcftransfer@ucfunds.org. massachusettscongress.org. And if you want to call, you can call 877-806-4989. Correct. If you do call, identify yourself as a church of the Massachusetts Congregational Fund, because we do have some churches in Massachusetts that already invest directly with us. And then when you identify yourself as an MCF client, they will know immediately how to route the call so that it gets sent to Stacy or Matt or Howard or myself. And if you have the application where you're asked to identify how you want to allocate your investments, the contact information is located there also. Dick? On page 4.
I'm Dick Osterberg, one of the long-term trustees of the Mass Congregational Fund. And as we went through this whole process of determining where we were relevant, where we became irrelevant, where we added value or didn't, we've had now 10 years of watching the United Church Funds and working with them on how they invest and how they do their job, and have watched them over the last 10 years ramp up and build the service component side of what they do for the smaller churches. They primarily, over the years, were managing the funds for the larger institutions and the large institutions of the church, which had staff folk who would be watching out for whole parts of what we, as the Massachusetts Congregational Fund trustees, were doing on behalf of you. As we saw this morph and change, it became apparent to us that this 0.33% of expense was really something that was redundant and we needed to find a way to stop. Also, this fund has been around a long, long time where we, trying to be efficient, had an equity fund and a fixed income fund. Modern portfolio theory says that we need to be able to present to you a broad palette of funds that are available. So what we see here is the ability to do that. And as we decided to go forward, a significant component part of this was the commitment of the conference to go forward likewise, arm in arm with the local churches in carrying this to the next level of direct investment with the United Church Funds. So the conference will be a significant investor in the United Church Funds. The conference will have a subcommittee that will be carrying out those same monitoring functions that the Mass Congregational Fund trustees did. And as Don said, part of that job will be to keep the feet to the fire, and we are committed to do that. Thank you.
And the trustees of the Massachusetts Congregational Fund have held our feet to the fire, as was really their responsibility to do on your behalf. And as investors of the conference directly investing with us, they will continue to hold our feet to the fire and making sure that we're providing the right kind of information, not only to the conference, but to the churches of the conference that choose to invest directly with us. You all have been very well served by the Massachusetts Congregational Fund and Lois Alexander and the people that have worked with that and the trustees of the fund. And we can't thank all of them enough for the partnership that we've enjoyed over the last 10 or 11 years with the Massachusetts Congregational Fund. And we promise to provide that same level of support and service to you if you invest directly with us. And again, as I answered the question, even if you choose not to invest with us, we're still here to provide those services to you as part of the United Church of Christ, especially around planned giving and good governance endowment policy making. So I just wanted to leave you with that. So we're not going to drag this out. One last time to ask a question. Yes, ma'am. The question is, if a church decides to invest directly with United Church funds, how quickly will it be notified that the transfer has been made? The transfer will occur on July the 1st, and within a few days of that, statements will go out. So within a week, you will have confirmation. We'll even try to find a way to communicate directly with you that the transfer is complete, and then the statements will follow. But we have to take a few days just to get everything posted. But it's really nothing. There's not even cash transferring unless you reallocate how you're invested. If you just go directly to the total equity and fixed income, it's just really a book entry on our side. But we will confirm that your account has been established and that it has been funded as of July the 1st.
So a simple, if you will, way to effect the transfer is just to have the direct transfer into the fixed income and I think the total equity funds, and then at another point in time to reallocate the investments.
The question is, would the simple way be to just let it transfer directly into the total equity and fixed income and then at a later time reallocate? That's one way to do it. But for us, it's up to you. We can do whatever you want, whether you want to make that reallocation decision up front and it transfer on July the 1st, or if you'd rather just transfer it and then have the conversations about it later. That would just be left up to the individual church.
In my experience in congregational churches, that everything is done by committee vote. Sometimes it takes longer to make decisions than we would like.
So the statement is that in congregational churches, most decisions are made by committee vote, and that takes longer than usual. Believe me, we understand that. We live with our own committees. I am on the board of the United Church of Christ and making decisions there. I mean, everywhere you go in the church is that way. That's a good thing. It's always not the best thing, but it's the way that we live as a church. Jim.
So Don, if these churches represented here or the churches who are not here, if they do nothing, what happens and on what date does it happen?
The question is, if the churches here and the other churches not here do nothing, what will happen and when will that happen? If we do not hear from any churches, every investment that you currently have with the Massachusetts Congregational Fund will automatically transfer to United Church funds into the total equity and fixed income funds on July the 1st. So if we don't hear from you, that's what's going to happen. We would like the opportunity to work with you to make sure it's the right decision for you. Yes.
Yes, I sometimes say that the motto of congregational churches is that the buck stops nowhere. One of the questions in our church is, who's to sign on the dotted line? Is it the trustees of the permanent funds, which tends to be the case in our bylaws, but then the other question is, how about the church treasurer, and what role is that? So we're planning on consulting, some of our legal counsel just to get that clear. If you were to look at the bylaws, or if I were to explain a little bit of the scenario, might you be able to give us some guidance as to who signs on the dotted line?
The question is, who signs the paperwork that affects these transfers? That is for each congregation to determine, and if your bylaws already specify that, that is sufficient. What we require is a resolution by the governing board or the congregation if there are no bylaws that otherwise state that. And the resolution has to state what capacities within the church have the authority to make these decisions. And so if you don't have something that already states it, we have a model resolution that you then should pass, and then that will be who should be signing the documentation. Jim?
But once again, I just want to reiterate what you said before that, and that is, if the church does nothing, if it doesn't answer this question about who should sign this, if it passes no resolution, if you don't hear from that church, their current allocation between fixed and equity will then become their own church account with UCF in that same proportionality.
The statement was that if the churches do not make any decision and do not provide any paperwork, just a reminder, it will transfer in the same proportion in which it is currently allocated. For those churches that we do not receive paperwork, we still need the documentation. So if the automatic transfers occur, we will be contacting each of those churches to say, this is what happened because we didn't hear from you. Now that you have an account with us, we need this resolution. We need the paperwork. We need to know who are the people that we need to send statements to. We still have to have that information. So we'll be in contact with the churches if we do not receive the formal instructions and documentation prior to July the 1st. Dan.
Follow up on Jim's comment. Very clear. That's where your money already is. It's not like these assets are being held by Mass Congregational Fund and go to UCF. They're already there.
The statement is just a reminder that the assets that you have invested with the Massachusetts Congregational Fund already reside in the funds of United Church Funds. It's just that the ownership will transfer from the MCF into a separate account in the United Church Funds account structure. The monies won't really move. Like I said, it's really paperwork. It's accounting entries and so forth, but it's not like you're moving into something that doesn't already exist. Yes, sir.
Earlier during the presentation, there was some indication there was one or more of these accounts that were relatively new accounts or new funds. And so they wouldn't have very much record of performance up to this point. Is that correct?
That is correct. The balance,
Which ones were those?
the Beyond Fossil Fuels funds were opened in November of 2014. So we have about a year and a half of performance on those funds. The question was, which funds have, we mentioned that there were some newer funds. Which ones were they and how long have they been in existence? And it was the two Beyond Fossil Fuels funds. Earlier, it seemed like there were no questions, and then there was a flurry of questions. So maybe if we just sit here, the Quaker style, and wait till the spirit moves, there might be another question. Going once, going twice. Again, thank you. And does anyone from MCF want to have a closing remark? Or Jim, before I do that, let me just say thank you to the people that are observing this webinar online, and to let all of you know that for those that are not here present today and those that were not able to be online this morning with us, this will be available online for any other church to view this session beginning on Monday on our website at ucfunds.org.
So first, I'd like to ask for a round of applause for Don and his staff. And then I'd like for the trustees of the Mass Congregational Fund to please stand and receive our applause also. Oh, Don is reminding me that since I don't have the fiduciary obligations that he has, that I can plug the Beyond Fossil Fuel Fund. And since lunch isn't yet served, I might as well fill a little bit of time doing that. I'll just make one comment and say the United Church of Christ in 2013, in July 2013, was the first denomination and the first national entity of any kind in America to vote to commit to investments that did not include extraction companies, fossil fuel companies. They go by different names. And there was some provisions in that resolution that urged, because Synod cannot compel anything, it urged United Church Funds and our pension board to actually create a Beyond Fossil Fuel Fund. And as Don just said, in November of 2014, a little more than a year after that, a Beyond Fossil Fund Beyond Fossil Fuel Fund appeared was created by United Church Funds. This was the first of its kind fund available for not just United Church of Christ churches, but also for churches of other denominations to invest in. As sort of the climate spokesman for the United Church of Christ on a national basis, it's been a shock to me that more churches haven't invested in that. If you look at their performance, which as somebody's question over here suggested is only a year and a half long, you'll see it's performed rather well. But that's not my field of expertise. What I do want to bear witness, though, is that this kind of intentional ethical investing is an important consideration for any of your congregations. And this transition, that effective July 1st, is an opportunity not only for your congregation to have a conversation about the current balance you have between fixed income investment and equity income investment, but also to have the conversation about, in addition to all these other screens, as Howard so ably said earlier, in addition to these screens, would you want to add to your intentionality that your church is on record, as I think about a dozen of our churches have already done, your church is on record saying that just as we should not wreck the earth with our behavior, we should not profit from wrecking the earth with our investments. So that's the consideration. It's obviously a church consideration. You are all welcome for a lunch, which will be served here in about 15 minutes. There's another group that will be joining us for lunch. And over that course of 15 minutes, if you want to have any further conversation with any of the trustees of the Mass Congregational Fund or any of the staff of United Church Funds, I would invite you to do so. I'm just so pleased that you all showed up today. And as Don has already said, your questions were terrific. So thank you, and bring this good news back to your congregations. Thank you.